We got to our destination, went to put our gear down, and the gear would not come down.
A small plane with 4 people on board had to make an emergency landing Friday.
San Jose Tower 304 Lima Alpha, we're going to have to belly land it.
On February 28th, 2020, me and 2 other individuals, including my instructor, jumped in my 1989 Piper Malibu, headed to E16 in Southern California. This was a training flight. I was trying to build time in this aircraft and get the proper certifications I needed. On our way down, we had the perfect tailwind. It was a beautiful sunshine day. We got to E16, we started our descent. We were on an IFR route and they sent us down fairly quickly. We went from a very cold temperature to a very warm temperature. On that descent, we could not get the gear to drop. We knew that we didn't have the gear down because there was not 3 lights on the panel, as well as we couldn't hear the noise, the airflow that would be caused from the gear down. We started to do some circles, pulled out the POH, started going through the manual of all the emergency procedures that were required to get the gear to go down. Followed the steps of pulling the breaker, pulling the emergency release. We did it time and time again because we didn't believe this could be happening. Luckily, we had trained and we had read through the POH with my previous instructors. I happened to be with Kent on this day. Kent was not my normal instructor, but Kent was kind of being the second set of eyes on me to see how I was doing in the plane and see if I was ready for an FAA exam or not. After fighting for probably 15 to 20 minutes, we decided, you know what, let's go over to San Jose International Airport. We'll go by the tower and they can take a peek because the other airport did not have a tower. The tower confirmed that there was not a landing gear. They sent us back over to E16 and had us circle around over E16 for a little bit. We were still trying to get a hold of Piper Aircraft. We were getting a hold of mechanics that were on the ground in San Jose, which were amazing mechanics that were helping us try to work through the problems. They got Piper Aircraft on the phone and we began running through scenarios. We learned where the valve was that was not working on the emergency release, and that was between the co-pilot and the pilot's seat and the floorboard. It required removing of several screws, which was tricky because we didn't fly with a lot of tools, but we happened to have a screwdriver and Leatherman that we were able to get those screws out and pry up part of the floorboard to get down to that valve. We got to that valve and manually we tried to release that valve, which is really frustrating because it didn't matter if Tom Cruise was in that plane or any of the best pilots in the world. That gear was not coming down. There's no way. One of the hardest parts of not being able to get the gear down was having to call my wife. She just lost her brother in a plane crash in South Dakota, and it just was a couple months prior to my incident, and I knew that she was really scared. She was worried that I wasn't gonna make it. We assured her and got back to work. I've always had a motto in my mind of what's next. You know, what is the next problem? Let's solve the problem, let's figure it out. And I've always found that as you put that as a priority, solving the next problem, that you can figure it out. We began to say prayers, as you can imagine, asking for that landing gear to drop, and it would not drop. We must have followed the POH emergency procedures manual 5 to 10 different times trying to get that to drop, maybe even 20 times with no luck. We were also trying to bleed off some fuel during this time because if we came in to do that gear up landing, we didn't want to fire. Kent and I decided that we'd keep circling and keep working on this valve. We did everything we could to get that valve to release, besides cutting a hydraulic line that we wanted to cut, but Piper Aircraft had advised us not to cut that line. We then made a decision that, you know what, we need to go in. I requested foam to be put on the San Jose runway to help with reducing the chances of fire, and we began our approach into the San Jose runway. As we were coming into the runway, there was helicopters around, there was fire trucks around, and you could see the people down below. It was kind of a little nerve-wracking because all these people were watching and wanting to see what the result was, which kind of built confidence, I think, in me and my instructor that, you know what, we're going to take and make sure this is a great landing. We came in, we landed. It was a little bumpy ride. We had a little stall at the end of our landing, but Kent and I had made a decision that we wanted to be as slow as possible. Not slow enough to stall, but as slow as possible. But the cool thing is we didn't slide but maybe 50 to 60 feet till we screeched to a stop. We did turn the engine off. I probably wouldn't turn the engine off if I had to do it again, because it would have been nice to have that power to keep us from stalling. But once we landed on that day, the cockpit filled with smoke, which had come from scraping on the concrete, and it was just concrete dust that was inside the plane. So we opened the door and we all got out. We had a plan of who was going to open the door, and one of the passengers, that was their responsibility. They popped the door, and that concrete dust started to fly out of the plane, which made it look like there was a fire. They jumped out. The news was still reporting at this time, ABC News and a bunch of other from San Jose, because we shut down an international airport. One of the craziest parts of that whole time was watching on my iPad on ForeFlight, which if you don't have ForeFlight as a pilot, what a neat app. I mean, phenomenal app. I was looking at that and watching all this traffic leave San Jose International, which made us feel even worse because we knew that we were shutting down the airport. We knew that it was going to slow things down for a little bit for everybody. Back to, we landed, got out. The firefighters were there ready to put out a fire because they thought maybe there was a fire because there was smoke going. Well, I was worried that they were going to start spraying water inside the plane. So I grabbed the bags in the back and I started throwing them out, which was really funny because some of the news articles, which talk about sometimes fake news, they started saying that we were moving drugs. And that's why we were chucking the bags out, that, you know, there was comments, oh, I think they're moving drugs. But we threw the bags out because we didn't want them to get wet, not because we were moving drugs, because I was worried they were going to spray in there. Kind of a neat story, the mechanic that we were on the phone with that was there in San Jose came running out with forklifts and tires and several of his employees to lift that plane up. They put the forks underneath each of the wings. They lifted the plane. And he literally, the mechanic went in with a wrench. We were trying to find a wrench to loosen that fitting on the back of the valve. But we couldn't find anything that could turn it. He put the right wrench on there, turned that just a smidgen, and it let off enough pressure and the gear dropped. And then they just towed it back like any other plane. It was so frustrating for me because we literally needed to turn a fitting just a quarter of an inch, and it would release enough pressure for that gear to drop. It's the saddest day of my life because we don't have a ton of money, and we put a lot of money into that plane, and it was the first pressurized plane and the first plane that had de-icing capabilities. We were always running around in a little Bonanza or a 152, and so we were really excited about this plane. We'd only owned it 2 months. It had just came out of an annual. So we believed that the plane was perfectly safe because we'd had so many eyes on it. We weren't concerned of any unsafety parts of the plane. We've since done a little research, and any of those Piper Malibus with a Parker Hannifin landing gear have had issues with the valve not releasing at times. One of the coolest parts of the story though was all of our friends started kicking immediately. Everybody's texting. One of my favorite people in the world is a pilot for Southwest Airlines. That's a friend of my business partner's. He was so kind to get us flights immediately. We went straight over to the San Jose International Airport, and within an hour of doing a gear up landing, he had tickets for us, headed back to Salt Lake City, Utah for my instructor and I. We went into the San Jose International Airport, and I was just really hungry because we literally started our day, and now this was 3 o'clock in the afternoon now, and I was really hungry, so I went over and waited in the Jamba Juice line, and I was standing in the Jamba Juice line, and there was this lady in front of me as I was waiting for a Jamba Juice because I was so hungry. And this lady's standing there and talking on the phone, and she said, I'm not gonna make my flight because some idiot forgot to put down his landing gear and landed out on the runway. And so now we're not gonna be able to take off. And I was standing behind her, and I was just laughing to myself thinking, I was that idiot. And we really did all we could, and so it kind of helped me have a life lesson too. You know, whatever's next in your life, it's okay. It's okay to take and deal with the punches that are thrown at you. In business, there's challenges every day that are thrown at us. It's something new every day. And so my motto is kind of, well, what's next? You know, what are we going to fix next? And every day there's something new and next. We got home. It was great to get to hug my wife again and my kids and assure them that it was okay. But it was very frustrating because we literally were out a lot of money. Later on, we came to find out that the insurance wasn't going to be able to cover it because the instructor was with me was not a named pilot on the policy, and so the insurance company was able to get out of it. So as we were coming into land, you know, a lot of people always ask, well, what was going through your head, Brian, as you were coming into land? Well, number one, we were trying to focus on all the procedures for the last time of, you know, how to shut things off if you have to do emergency landing. We read through that on the SimCom manual and in the POH manual. We were coming into land though, and as we were coming in, I really wasn't scared. I was more so frustrated that we were gonna ruin this perfectly good plane that had a little fault and a little valve under the floorboard. It was really frustrating that we couldn't fix that right now. That's part of being able to survive a gear up landing, is staying focused on the problem and flying the plane. Once we knew we couldn't solve the problem, it was all about flying the plane. We were very focused on altimeter, on our approach, on our airspeed. A lot of pilots like to criticize our stall, and yeah, it could have been better. Number one, we should have left the engine running. Number two, looking back, we would maybe land in the grass and not on the concrete. Maybe it would have been a softer landing to land in the medium, and I probably would do that again between the two runways in the grassy area. It might be softer, and come in with the engine running. Yeah, it would ruin the engine, but what's the most important thing at the end of the day? To be able to have that engine already going, that we can give it more throttle, to give it more speed, to land it smooth. It's very unique. When you land with the gear up, I can't even describe it, because your flare point is very different than any other flare with a landing gear, because you feel like you're already on the ground. Your depth perception is very different than normal when you look out the window. So knowing how to flare right and at the right time is very difficult. So what's next? The next is to rebuild. We're currently flying a 182, but you don't give up. Just because you had a little gear up landing and lost some money, it's business, it's life, it's the way that it works. So we're gonna go find the next good, reliable airplane. We're gonna buy it and we're gonna move on.